Persians versus Greeks, 480 BC, the Battle of Salamis. The sea that burned with freedom. You came for the night, a small fleet defied an empire. You'll hear the water. Remember, a moon hangs thin over black water. Oars whisper. On the ridge above the straits, a king sits on a carved throne to watch his triumph written across the waves. Below him waits a city not made of stone, but of wood. 371 Greek triremes, beaked like hunting birds, facing a Persian armada that may be twice their number. The numbers alone should decide the dawn. They don't, because a single message has already crossed the water sent by a man who smiles when other men lose sleep. He tells the great king the Greeks are panicking. He begs him to seal the exits, to close the jaws. The king believes him. The exits tighten. The water narrows. The oars keep whispering. On a hidden deck, a torch flashes once. A boy grips a rope until his fingers go numb. Somewhere, in the dark, a bronze prow noses forward, inch by inch, toward the sound of breathing on another ship. And the question creeps in with the tide. Whose trap is sealing around whom? The torch goes out. The throne waits. The sea holds its breath. The letter and the dark begin, not with trumpets, but with a scratch of ink, a strip of papyrus, a hand that looks calm because it must. Themistocles leans over a table none of us would notice rough wood, a lamp that gutters when the night wind tests the tent. He doesn't write like a general. He writes like a locksmith. The words he chisels will turn tumblers inside the mind of a king. He knows what fear tastes like tonight. It tastes like brine and ash. Athens is behind him, empty grandmothers ferried to islands, fathers rowing in crews beside sons who still carry their first beard like a promise. The city of Athena now lives on the water, its walls and planks, its goddess looking down at hulls instead of temples. The Persian army has burned what was left glowing. A city can be ash and still be undefeated if the people inside it have learned how to move their hope. Across the water lies power the earth groans under. Asia has come west, like a tide that no one thought would stop. Phoenician shipwrights have built a forest that floats. Egyptians row in lines that look endless from a hill. Medes, Cilicians, Ionians in Persian pay every coastline the empire touched is here. Every accent, every god wearing a borrowed name. Numbers like this do not fight. They surround. Themistocles studies the map of the straits with his fingertips. He doesn't need ink lines. He has rode these waters since before he wore a cloak with borders. If you try to breathe too much air at once, you choke. If you try to turn too many ships at once, you flail. He looks at the narrow channel between Salamis and the Attic coast. He hears it, more than sees it, as a throat that tightens when too many voices shout. Narrow water gives advantage to hands that have rehearsed the same stroke until the body answers before the mind has learned the question. He writes to Xerxes. He signs nothing. The messenger will be a servant named Xerxes, whose face is small enough to be ignored and whose memory is good enough to be fatal. The words are simple, almost humble. The Greek alliance is fracturing. Night will shatter it into ships that flee different directions. Seal the straits, and the victory is yours by morning. He writes what a king wants to believe, not what a king needs to know. Xerxes takes the message and becomes at once larger and more fragile. Men look at him as if he holds flame in paper. They do not ask to read the lines. They nod. One of them touches the amulet under his tunic. A little bit of bone wrapped in leather. A superstition he says he doesn't keep. Another checks the lashings on a boat that has carried smuggled wine and frightened children, and now will ferry a sentence. Above the water, the throne is already being set. It's a thing of carved arrogance, planted on a height between olive trees, so a ruler of continental distances can watch the little theater of local defiance. He will see everything. He will understand nothing until the understanding is too late to spend. Along the beaches of Salamis, Greek crews are not silent because they are brave. They are silent because breathing is work when the night has eyes. A Corinthian captain murmurs to his oarsmen that their wives are counting in whispers on the island behind them. 1 heartbeat per stroke, to pull them back alive. An Achaemenid runs a whetstone down the edge of a bronze ram and pretends not to think of the man who will feel it first. A Phocian boy too young, which is why he's here, teaches his hands to tie the same knot over and over until the rope remembers without him. In a shelter where the smell of pitch and fish and sweat clots in the air. Eurybiades, commander in name, looks to the Athenian who commands by gravity. They have argued for days that felt like years. Platea the temptation to dig into earth and call that safety. Themistocles never argued for earth. He argued for water that can be clenched in a fist without staying clenched. He argued for the wooden walls. The oracle promised those walls are alive. He says, because men move inside them. He does not speak in inspiration tonight. He speaks in logistics. He speaks of how to keep a line from turning into a knot, how to keep panic from becoming a chorus. Assignments pass like quiet sparks along the shore. An Athenian squadron will anchor the left where the channel tightens into a needle's eye. Aegina will hold the right, because they are stubborn and because their rams are old but honest. The center will breathe with Sparta's rhythm and Athens' urgency, sharing a spine. A signal will mean attack. Another will mean famine of mercy. And still, as the lamp sways and the letter dries, no one moves as if conquest is inevitable. They move as if dawn is a coin that might land either way. We go below deck before the morning can find us. Triremes are narrow, candid creatures. They do not hide their strength. They wear it along their flanks in the bodies of men, stacked in 3 banks, 3 knights at the top, Zygits in the middle, Thalamites near the water's throat. Each man's world is an oar, a bench, a beat. The drum is a heart that someone else keeps. The coxswain is a voice that the body will obey, whether it agrees or not. The prow is a blade sewn to a fist. Leon, a Thalamite whose village had 1 street and 2 olive presses, listens for the drum that isn't beating yet. He thinks of his wife, whose hair smelled like smoke when they left because everything smelled like smoke, and of the promise he made to come back with more than apologies. He does not think of Persia because Persia is too large for midnight. He thinks of the man in front of him and the man behind him and the way their breaths will need to become one noise, or they will fight the ship instead of fighting the sea. On the other side of the water, an admiral counts ships by nations the way a merchant counts bolts of cloth. Phoenicia, Egypt, Cilicia, Cyprus, Lycia, Pamphylia, Ionia, Caria, names that sound like a tide rolling pebbles. He orders the exits to be closed. He does not call it closing an exit. He calls it perfecting the victory. Scout vessels slide into position, faint and predatory as cats. Oars dip and rise without splash. The straits grow narrower without moving. Sisinus returns with the silence of a stone. He does not tell the words he heard. He tells the feeling in the tent where he bowed satisfaction like meat after hunger. Themistocles nods once. He doesn't allow a smile to widen. He doesn't give the knight anything to notice. He turns to the officers and says that dawn will happen sooner than they expected because fate respects schedules written by deception. A Spartan who has been slow to trust this Athenian watches him the way a wolf watches fire. He asks if this is courage or cornered cunning. Themistocles answers without a word. He gestures at the map and the shoreline and the moon and the logic of wood and a throat of stone. Courage or cunning, the tide does not care. It cares about angles and timing and who reaches the oarlock first. There is a first payoff hidden in the smallest detail. Themistocles has not only lured the fleet inward, he has lured the king's eyes to a single ridge, away from the flexible hand that might have felt the trap. When power narrows its gaze to witness triumph, it stops feeling the room. Above, the throne glitters. Below, the water edits an empire down to pieces, small enough for rams to understand. If voices like this make the past burn in your chest, stay with me. Give this story your attention. Share it with someone who thinks numbers always win, and join me for the next breath. We're not finished. The sea hasn't spoken yet. The oars start to move with the sound a flock makes on a cold morning. Not beating wings testing them. The coxswain measures out a pace no one has agreed to, and everyone accepts. 1, 2, 1, 2. Breath meets wood. Wood meets water. The prow learns its hunger again. Eurybiades lights a lamp at the stern and shields it with his hand, so it becomes a language of shadows. Lamp, covered, revealed, covered. Signals are a new alphabet every battle. Tonight, that alphabet will pull men into a geometry they cannot see, but will feel like destiny when it holds. Why move along the line and meet men whose names history traded for the color of their tunics? A Salaminian with a scar like a comet along his jaw whispers a prayer that insults the god into noticing him. An Achaemenid who has cut as many nets as he has cutthroats hums a song he used to sing while straining a fishing line. A Plataean who ran from fire and will never forgive his own legs for it grips the railing and imagines it's the hand of the friend he lost at the... They do not think of glory. Glory is a rumor. They think of weight and timing and the way bronze sounds when it finds wood. Themistocles walks the beach, not like a man inspecting, but like a man memorizing each face in an hourglass whose last grains are precious. He stops by Leon's ship and looks into the dark between benches. He sees eyes reflecting lampglow like animals. He says nothing clever. He says, if your arms keep faith with each other, the sea will keep faith with you. It is not poetry. It is a contract. He passes the Spartan contingent, their captain hair braided, as if to tie his mind back from wandering, asks what song the Athenians will sing. Themistocles answers that Athenians sing like men who already know the words to Los. It is not an insult. The Spartan nods. Different soils grow different courage. Tonight they will learn each other's melodies in the same chorus. Iron forest, wooden walls, morning rises like a blade, drawn slow. Mist clings to the straits, soft as breath over the wreckage of certainty. The water holds its secrets close. Only the faint slap of oars hints at what waits beneath. A new light touches the prows of hundreds of ships, each trembling in the same thin hush before violence begins to remember its purpose. Themistocles watches from his deck. His eyes are steady, but his pulse moves faster than the tide. Every plan, every lie, every sleepless night has led to this narrowing of water and will. Around him, men stretch cold fingers and whisper to their gods. They know that soon, no prayer will be louder than the sound of bronze meeting oak. Across the channel, the Persian fleet unfurls a forest of masts, swaying under banners too heavy for morning wind. Colors bleed together in the haze. crimson, gold, black, an empire adrift. From his high seat on the hill, Xerxes sees not men but numbers, an ocean of obedience awaiting his command. He cannot hear how close their ships have drifted. He cannot smell the oil that leaks like blood across the surface. Themistocles gives no grand speech, only a nod toward the signal fire. A single torch lifted. The Greek line moves. At first, the oars slide through water with the tenderness of habit. Then rhythm, tight, relentless, growing faster until the straits pulse with heartbeat sound. The Persian vanguard surges forward, eager to crush before crushed, their commanders shouting over the chaos. But the straits betray them. The water they believed to rule turns traitor, pressing their ranks too close, leaving no room to breathe, no room to turn. The first impact sounds not like battle, but like the earth cracking open. Athenian bronze tears into Phoenician hull. Splinters rain into the sea. The prow of another ship slams into the wreck before it can sink, jamming the channel tighter. Shouts turn to screams. Commanders lose the edges of their orders to the wind. Themistocles feels the tremor under his feet and knows the trap has closed. He raises his arm again, and a second wave of triremes charges forward, not in disorder, but with cold precision. The Greeks fight as though every stroke rewrites the fate of their homeland. Oars dip, rise, bite again. Ramming speed turns thought into instinct. Salt spray blinds, sweat burns, air becomes a weapon shared by too many lungs. On the Persian side, confusion multiplies like fire in dry reeds. Egyptian ships built for open seas twist and crash against allies. Oars shatter, sails tear, men fall into the crush of water that no longer remembers who sent them. From the shore, Xerxes' view blurs. The perfect symmetry of his fleet dissolves into noise. A Spartan ship cuts through the chaos, its commander shouting nothing, only pointing. Ahead, an enormous Phoenician trireme attempts to pivot, her ram gleaming like a beast's horn. But the current grips her stern, dragging her broadside across the channel. The Spartan prow strikes her midship. The sound that follows is not heard. It is felt through bone and breath. The Phoenician deck splits. Men tumble into black water streaked with sunlight and oil. For a heartbeat, the world pauses. Even the gulls seem to hang suspended between fear and hunger. Then the sea moves again, furious and alive. Leon rows until his arms scream. His vision tunnels to rhythm, 1-2. 1-2, and he can't tell if the voice above him is his commander or the echo of his own pulse. He hears wood breaking somewhere close and a man calling for a name that doesn't answer. The smell of pitch and blood mix until they are one. He doesn't see the Persian arrow until it thuds into the mast beside his head. The shaft quivers, humming with unfinished purpose. Leon pulls harder. Above deck, Themistocles reads the battle, not through sight but through patterns, the way sound changes, where shouts multiply or vanish. He senses momentum turning in their favor, but victory is not a word he lets form yet. Too soon invites punishment. A sudden gust sweeps through the straits. It's small, almost merciful, but two men balanced between survival and ruin, it feels divine. Persian sails catch it wrong. Greek helmsmen, trained in wind's language, adjust instinctively. The enemy drifts sideways, vulnerable, exposed. One moment of nature's whim becomes a blade in mortal hands, and then something shifts. A flare of light where none should be. A Persian ship, a flame from spilled oil, becomes a moving torch. The fire races up her ropes, jumps to the next hull. The water around them ignites with streaks of burning slick. Men dive, only to rise burning brighter. Themistocles stares into the inferno his own deception has kindled. Freedom has a smell now, smoke and salt and human skin. He grips the railing, steady against the rocking deck. This is what victory feels like before it earns the name. Across the straits, Xerxes stands. The gold on his robes catches the sun, as if mocking its light. For the first time, his face does not move. Courtiers murmur, unsure whether to speak of courage or calamity. Below him, his army's reflection wavers in the burning sea. In that moment, the king sees his power not as vastness but as weight. He has dragged too much glory into too small a space, and it is crushing itself. Themistocles signals again, withdraw half the line. Let the Persians chase into the narrowing gap. They must. Pride cannot retreat while being watched by a throne. The sea swallows them whole. As Greek ships pivot out, others surge inward, closing from both sides. The trap within the trap tightens. Themistocles watches the pattern unfold exactly as the letter had whispered it would. Still, there is no triumph in his eyes. Only the cold recognition of what it costs to outthink gods. Leon hears a crack behind him. The sound of a Persian ship's mast falling across his own deck. Splinters rain down. A man screams as an oar pinions his arm. Leon wrenches it free, pushes the body aside, rows on. His world has narrowed to breath and order. When he glances up, the water is red but moving, always moving. Hours collapse into minutes. Minutes stretch like years. The sea is thick with wreckage. Themistocles' flagship carves through floating corpses and shattered beams. Each impact jolts through the deck like a heartbeat slowing. And then, a hollow lull between waves. It lasts too long to trust. Themistocles feels it first. The shift underfoot, subtle but certain. The tide has begun to turn outward. Soon the current will drag the debris and the living toward open water. If the Persians regroup before dusk, their numbers could still smother what remains of Greece's defense. He gives the order to regroup, to hold formation. But above the din, a cry rises from the right flank, a new fleet cresting the horizon. Reinforcements. For a heartbeat, the Greek crews think they're saved. Then the banners come into view, not friendly blue, but crimson. A reserve Persian squadron, late to the slaughter, fresh and eager. Themistocles' breath stills. The sea, it seems, is not finished writing. He turns to his helmsman, voice steady despite the fire still painting the sky. We've trapped them long enough, he says quietly. Now we must trap time. The oars dig in again. The Greek fleet pivots toward the newcomers, exhausted but unbroken. Smoke drifts like ghosts between them and the setting sun. Every heartbeat becomes a countdown. Above, Xerxes watches the horizon brighten with new sails. For the first time that day, hope stirs behind his eyes. Themistocles, seeing the same sight, feels something colder. The battle has not ended. It has merely changed shape. The sun drops lower. Shadows lengthen over floating corpses. The straits, once a mirror, are now a graveyard. Themistocles tightens his grip on the rail. Hold the line, he murmurs not to his men, but to the sea itself, as if asking it to choose. And far away, beneath the gathering dusk, the sound of new oars begins again. Where the wind turns evening bleeds down the sky like a wound that refuses to close. The smoke from burning ships climbs upward, twisting into new constellations no god has yet named. The air tastes of iron and ash, the sea thick with broken oars and shattered pride. But from the east, new sails rise fresh dark, glinting with the promise of unfinished ruin. Themistocles narrows his eyes. He has seen this before, hope coming dressed as despair, or despair disguised as hope. Behind him, the exhausted crews lean on their oars, breath ragged, knuckles bleeding from splintered handles. Some whisper prayers, some whisper nothing. There's no time left for faith, only decisions. The new Persian squadron sweeps forward with the arrogance of reinforcements that believe they are arriving to victory. Their prows gleam, newly polished, untouched by fire. They row as though the gods themselves have cleared the way. But the gods tonight are silent in watching. Themistocles turns to his helmsman. Let them think we're finished. His voice is calm. To calm, he knows men listen hardest when calm cuts through chaos. We'll show them the sea still has teeth. Orders pass quietly through the fleet. Greek ships feign retreat, drifting backward toward the shallows of Salamis, their movements slow and deliberate, like prey pretending weakness. The Persians follow, laughter echoing across the straits, growing louder as they close the distance. Even Xerxes, from his golden throne, above the shore, begins to lean forward again. The tide, it seems, is returning to its master, but beneath the surface, the water carries whispers of another plan. The Greeks are not retreating, they are drawing their pursuers into a narrowing death. Between two lines of reefs, invisible in the dusk, lies the place Themistocles has chosen for the sea to take sides. Leon grips his oar, knuckles white. Around him, the rowers move in silence. The coxswain's rhythm has slowed to a whispering beat, barely enough to keep the ship alive in the current. Leon feels the weight of what's coming in the stillness between strokes. Every breath burns like prophecy. He catches the faint glint of Persian armor closing in, and for the first time, he doesn't feel fear only an edge of something else. Colder, sharper, the feeling of inevitability. The first Persian ram strikes an empty hull. A decoy ship, abandoned and floating near the shallows, crumples beneath the impact. The sound ripples across the channel. Confusion follows. The Persians shout for formation, but their own momentum betrays them. Ships collide in their haste. Sails tangle, masts grind, and the narrow water turns into a trap made of their own ambition. From the shadows, Themistocles signals with the torch. The Greeks pivot, not in retreat now, but in rebirth. Bronze prows cut through smoke like predators breaking cover. 100 ships surge forward with sudden fury. The water explodes into chaos once more. Leon's ship lunges into the fray. He can feel every collision through the soles of his feet. The prow rams a Persian hull, and the sound it makes is not noise. It's verdict. Men spill into the water, thrashing, clawing for anything that floats. The oars keep beating. Themistocles' voice carries over the din. Push them where the sea shall judge. The battle becomes a storm. Voices vanish in the roar of splintering wood. Arrows hiss through the smoke. One pierces the air beside Themistocles' face, close enough for him to smell the resin on the shaft. He doesn't flinch. He's already watching something else, something new on the horizon. A gust of wind sweeps across the straits. Violent and sudden, it catches the Persian sails full, driving their ships sideways into one another. Themistocles feels the shift like a pulse under the waterline. The wind that once served the empire now betrays it, pushing its fleet toward the reefs. The Greeks, oars rather than sails, move freely. For the first time all day, the sea itself fights beside them. Xerxes stands on his hill, fists clenched around his golden staff. His commanders shout, gesturing wildly at the tangle below. He can't hear them over the wind. The ocean that once mirrored his dominion now defies it. His throne trembles not from fear, but from the fury of a man who cannot command nature. Down below, the Persians begin to break. The sea that once promised triumph now becomes a graveyard. Ship after ship grinds against rock. The air fills with the cries of men, realizing too late that victory has changed its name. Leon's oar slips from his hands. He dives for it as the trireme shudders under impact. Another ship has slammed into their flank, a Persian vessel. Half burning, desperate, through the smoke, Leon sees faces young, terrified, so much like his own. For a heartbeat, time stills. He sees what war really is, not glory, but the mirror that shows every man his reflection before the sea takes it away. The Greeks ram again. The enemy ship splits apart, spilling men and fire into the water. The current drags the burning wreckage toward the reef. Leon pulls his oar free and returns to the rhythm. He rows without thought, only instinct. Each stroke feels like the heartbeat of a creature larger than all of them. Themistocles' fleet encircles what remains of the Persian armada. A silent signal, a flash of polished bronze in the fading light, and the final push begins. Ships drive inward, tightening the noose. Themistocles watches as the enemy line collapses, the grand design of an empire unraveling into driftwood, and screams. Yet even in triumph, his face remains carved from shadow. He knows that empires do not die in a single battle, they retreat. Plot, remember, as night falls, the surviving Persians attempt to flee toward open sea. Themistocles raises his arm to pursue, but then, from the darkness beyond the reefs, a low rumble answers him, a tremor, distant yet unmistakable. The sea beneath them shifts again. At first it sounds like thunder, but thunder comes from above. Themistocles peers into the distance. Beyond the horizon, something stirs, a movement too large, too deliberate. The moon breaks through the clouds, and in its reflection, the faint outlines of another fleet shimmer. Not Persian, not Greek, unknown. Themistocles' heart tightens. He knows every ally, every enemy that should exist on these waters. Whatever moves out there was not part of any plan. He feels the wind change direction, colder now, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something metallic. Leon stops rowing, breathless. Commander, do you hear that? Themistocles doesn't answer. He only watches as the mist thickens, swallowing the horizon whole. The victory at Salamis should be theirs. But the sea, ever hungry, never gives without asking for something back. As the last Persian ships burn and the Greeks begin to cheer, a single flash of light breaks through the fog, too far to be torchlight, too steady to be chance. A signal from the unknown fleet. Themistocles lowers his gaze to the dark water rippling around his ship. The gods, he murmurs, are not finished yet. The wind answers with a whisper that sounds like laughter, and the sea begins to move again. The sea that Burnonite has swallowed the straits, yet the water still glows, an afterimage of fire, oil, and shattered bronze drifting under the moon. Smoke trails across the stars like the handwriting of exhausted gods. The cries have thinned, the wind has slowed, but the sea remembers. It carries whispers, the weight of what it has devoured. Themistocles stands at the prow of his ship. His face is lit by the embers floating on the tide. Around him, his men move like shadows, slow, deliberate, half afraid. The silence might shatter if touched. The battle should be over. It should feel like victory. It doesn't. Victory sounds different in men's hearts than it does in their mouths. It is quieter, heavier. He can feel it pressing against his chest, like a tide he can't stop. Behind him, the crews tend to the wounded. A boy with half a tunic and both his courage still intact pours water over a man's burned arm. The man doesn't flinch. He's beyond the place where pain matters. Farther off, Leon sits by the rail, his fingers still trembling from the oar. His skin is streaked with blood that isn't his. He stares into the dark where the Persian fleet once was, and sees only movement, the slow, mournful drift of ships with no masters. Then, from the shore, a sound breaks the stillness, a horn, low and resonant. The Greeks look up, startled. Themistocles listens. It comes not from the sea, but from the ridge, where Xerxes' throne still sits beneath the blackened olive trees. Even in defeat, the great king calls his dead to attention. For a moment, Themistocles imagines the king's face, motionless, expression carved from disbelief. He knows Xerxes is watching, knows the man must decide whether to fight on or to retreat with the fragments of his empire. But kings don't retreat. They rewrite endings. Themistocles tightens his grip on the rail. He knows this isn't finished. The wind shifts again, colder now, drawing the smoke inland. Across the dark water, a handful of Persian survivors cling to what's left of their ships. Some are calling for help, others for their gods. The Greeks listen, unsure whether mercy is courage or weakness. Themistocles breaks the hesitation with a simple order. Pull them in. The men obey. A few Persians are hauled aboard, shivering, eyes wide, stripped of everything but breath. No one speaks. They are no longer enemies, just remnants of the same storm. One of the Persians, barely older than Leon, looks up at Themistocles and whispers a word in broken Greek. Fire. His hand points toward the open sea. Themistocles follows the gesture. There beyond the drifting smoke, faint light flickers on the horizon again. It isn't moonlight, it's deliberate, rhythmic, the same strange signal that had haunted him earlier. He calls for the helmsman. Bring us closer, he says quietly, but no torches. No noise, the fleet moves with ghost-like precision. Oars dip without sound, the water closing over them in smooth folds. Every man listens for what he cannot see. The light pulses again, 3 flashes. A pause, then one more. A pattern. Not Persian, not Greek. Something else entirely. As they draw nearer, the shape of the unknown vessels becomes clear, smaller, sleeker, built for speed rather than strength. Themistocles narrows his eyes. These are not warships of an empire. These are traders or raiders who have come to the edge of history to see which corpse to plunder. They are Greeks, perhaps, or pirates who owe allegiance only to opportunity. Themistocles feels anger rise, then fade. It doesn't matter who they are. The sea always brings scavengers after blood. Still, he must act before these ghosts find courage. He signals for half the fleet to hold position. The other half advances slowly. The new ships remain motionless, watching. One breaks from the group and glides forward, its oars dipping lazily. When it draws close enough, a voice calls out across the water, a woman's voice, sharp as glass, carrying through the night. "Hail, Themistocles of Athens," she says. "You've given the sea a story it will never forget." Themistocles, he knows that voice. Artemisia, queen of Halicarnassus, commander under Xerxes, the only one among his captains who had warned him not to fight here. Her ship, untouched, gleams like an accusation under the moonlight. "Your king watches from the hill." Themistocles calls back. Will you sail to tell him the truth or the lie he prefers? Artemisia laughs, a sound too bitter for victory, too alive for defeat. Kings don't pay for truth. They pay for silence. Her ship drifts closer until he can see her face, framed in black hair, streaked with salt. There's no crown now, no emblem of Persia, only the eyes of someone who survived by understanding when not to die. "You've won yourself a legend," she says, "but legends don't sleep. They eat their makers." She nods toward the Persian dead floating near the reefs. They believed in gods who reward obedience. You Greeks believe in gods who reward defiance. Either way, they still ask for blood. Themistocles studies her a long moment. "You could join them," he says. "You could burn with the rest and waste the lesson." She replies, "No, I'll carry it where your songs can't reach." Her ship turns away, slipping back into the fog. For a heartbeat, Themistocles thinks of ordering pursuit, but something in her calm stops him. Let her go. Let her tell whatever truth she wants. The sea will decide which version survives. Dawn creeps up at last, pale and cautious. The smoke thins, revealing what remains. Wrecks lodged against reefs, sails torn to ribbons, men sprawled across decks as if asleep. Themistocles steps onto the beach at his legs tremble when they touch solid ground. Around him, others do the same. Some kneel and kiss the sand. Some simply stand, dazed by survival. Eurybiades approaches, his face drawn but proud. "The king is gone," he says. "His army retreats north. The straits are ours." Themistocles nods but doesn't smile. "The straits were never ours. We only reminded them whose home this is." He turns to the horizon. The dawn light catches the drifting smoke, making it look like the sea itself is still burning. For the first time in days, the sound of birds returns, a fragile music above the wreckage. Yet even in that fragile calm, something unsettles him. The Persian survivors who were rescued stare silently toward the east. Their eyes hold no hatred, only knowledge. Armies retreat, but empires remember. Leon walks up beside him, eyes hollow but alive. "Is it over?" he asks. Themistocles doesn't answer at first. His gaze lingers on the water, on the glimmering wreckage that marks both triumph and warning. "Battles end," he says at last, "but wars only rest." Behind them, the men begin to chant, low at first, then louder, the name of Athens, the promise of freedom, the sound of a people remembering who they are. It spreads across the shore like fire, the rhythm of rebirth. Yet Themistocles hears something beneath it, a faint roll of thunder beyond the horizon, the same sound he'd heard before, distant but growing. He lifts his head toward the east. A storm is gathering there, dark and deliberate, swallowing the newborn sun. Leon follows his gaze. "What is it?" Themistocles breathes in the salt, the smoke, the heavy silence before the wind breaks again. "The sea," he says softly, "never forgets who's challenged it." The thunder answers from beyond the horizon, closer now, steady as a drumbeat. The battle may have ended, but the gods, it seems, are not finished counting. After the roar, the sea lies still, yet it feels awake, an animal breathing beneath its own reflection. Wreckage drifts between patches of early sunlight. A sail burns quietly near the reefs, its flame whispering in the wind, as if the battle refuses to die completely. Themistocles watches from the shore, his cloak heavy with salt. Behind him, Athens waits to be rebuilt. Before him, the empire he defied still breathes somewhere beyond the horizon. For the first time in days, he removes his armor. The sound of metal loosening feels like a sigh released by the world itself. He looks at the men gathering around small fires, farmers, sailors, refugees who now wear the title savior, without knowing what it means. Their laughter is uneasy, brittle. They talk of home, but no one mentions what they'll find when they return. Home has burned, and yet it waits. Eurybiades approaches through the smoke, his expression carved with fatigue and respect. "We did it," he says. Themistocles doesn't answer. Eurybiades frowns. "You should allow yourself one breath of pride." Themistocles looks toward the distant waters where Persian wrecks still float. "Pride is the first lie after victory," he says quietly. "It makes men deaf to what still moves in the dark." From the east, faint echoes ride the wind, the steady drumbeat of retreating armies. Xerxes' host is leaving Greece, but not empty. They carry rage, humiliation, and the memory of one man's defiance. Themistocles knows what that means. Defeat does not kill empires. It teaches them patience. Leon walks among the survivors, searching the faces for someone he lost. The boy's movements are slow, mechanical, as if each step has to remind his body what living feels like. He stops near a pile of broken shields and finds one marked with an Athenian crest, his brother's. He touches it. Just once, then sets it gently back down. When he finally looks up, the sea catches his reflection, and for the first time, he doesn't see a boy. He sees a man who has survived what gods themselves would hesitate to watch. A murmur spreads through the Greek camp. From the far end of the shore, a rider approaches, dust rising behind him. He dismounts before reaching Themistocles and kneels, breath ragged. "A message," he gasps. From Delphi, he hands over a small bronze tablet wrapped in waxed linen. Themistocles breaks the seal and reads. The words are few. The sea has spoken, but the land waits to answer. He folds the tablet without a word. The oracle's riddles always taste like prophecy disguised as warning. Eurybiades leans closer. "What does it mean?" "That this was not the end," Themistocles says, "only the pause between two storms." They walk to the water's edge. The tide has begun to rise, drawing fragments of the battle back toward the open gulf. Themistocles watches a Persian helmet tumble in the surf. Each wave carries it closer, then pulls it away again, like the ocean can't decide who it belongs to. Across the straits, smoke still clings to the ruins of burned ships. Among them, a small group of Persian survivors has built a raft. One of them, an officer, by the cut of his robe stands and shouts something across the water. Themistocles can't hear the words, but he understands the gesture. The man salutes, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. Themistocles raises his hand in return. Even enemies can recognize the weight of survival. That night, under a bruised sky, the victors gather around a single fire. They drink what remains of their rations, and for a brief, dangerous hour, they allow laughter. Leon sits beside Themistocles, silent. The older man studies him. "You rowed well," he says. Leon shakes his head. "I rowed because I had to. That's the only reason that matters." They fall quiet again, listening to the waves lap against the shore. The sound is softer now, almost human. Then, from somewhere beyond the firelight, a voice calls out a sentry's alarm. Shapes are moving in the water. For an instant, fear claws back into every chest. But as torches flare, the figures resolve into familiar outlines. Achaemenid boats returning from the channel. Their decks piled with salvaged survivors, both Greek and Persian. Some barely breathe. Some whisper thanks in languages the rescuers don't understand. Themistocles nods approval. Mercy tonight is strategy tomorrow. As dawn edges over the horizon, a messenger arrives from the Spartan camp. He brings word that Xerxes' army is retreating toward the Hellespont, leaving behind a rearguard to burn what it cannot hold. Sparta's king, he says, plans to strike the final blow when spring returns. Themistocles listens, his eyes distant. By spring, he murmurs, the sea will have washed away our footprints, but it will remember the blood. He walks down to the water once more. The tide has brought something strange, a fragment of a Persian banner. Silk torn and scorched, its golden thread glinting under the morning light. He picks it up and turns it in his hands. For all its beauty, it feels heavier than metal. A relic of an empire that still breathes beyond the horizon. Behind him, Eurybiades calls out, "You should rest. The men need their leader alive." Themistocles turns, the torn silk fluttering in his grasp. Alive? He almost smiles. "We've survived this night." That's not the same. He looks again toward the east, where the rising sun meets the dark edge of the sea. Somewhere out there, Xerxes rides in silence, his fleet reduced to memory, his ambition dented but not broken. Themistocles imagines him sitting aboard a gilded barge, staring back at Greece, vowing that no defeat lasts forever. The air grows heavy again, thick with the scent of smoke and salt. Leon joins him, gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you think he'll come back?" the boy asks. Themistocles watches the faint shimmer of waves and answers only after a long pause. "The sea will call him. It calls all men who believe they own it." They stand together as the first light spills across the straits, gilding the wrecks like monuments. Behind them, the men begin to rebuild their camp. Athens will rise again, they tell each other. They'll build stronger walls, grander temples. But the truest wall, the one that saved them, was made of men and wood and will. Themistocles knows it can vanish as easily as it appeared. He closes his eyes and listens to the rhythm of the waves, to the faint echo of drums still beating somewhere beyond the horizon. For a moment, it sounds like the sea's own heart. Then, faintly, he hears something else, a voice carried by the wind, distant but unmistakable. A woman's voice. Artemisia's, the sea never forgets. It whispers through the surf. When he opens his eyes, the horizon has changed. Dark clouds gather in the east, swallowing the newborn sun. A storm approaches swift, silent, inevitable. Themistocles stands motionless, watching as the first gust of wind lifts the torn Persian banner from his hand. It spins upward, caught between sky and sea, before vanishing into the growing dark. He doesn't move. He only whispers to himself, "Then neither shall we." The waves crash harder against the shore, as if answering, and in that moment, the sea that once burned with freedom seems to shudder again, alive, waiting, remembering.